everyone in any dimension of relation to urban has a smart city concept. Urban economists has their smart, the people in NGOs have their smart, and then they include the other stuff as well, the political scientists as well. So everyone has a smart city on top of his head. And then what we said in this MOOC was that we as IGLUS, we understand that there are different dimensions in the cities. City has politics, city has social dimensions, but for us, the focus is really on infrastructures. So the smart city for us is looking at the infrastructure, at least in this MOOC.
Yeah, it's this kind of thing.
Exactly. So we look what we call as a smart city, and we don't say that the other people do not have a right to call it a smart. The urban economists can call it smart something else. But for us, the definition of a smart is very much related to infrastructures. And this is somehow what we also try to do, I think, for the master as well, looking at the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So, and then once, maybe you go to the next slide. After this, you have the slide or not? The next one? No. So, before. Then the thing is that when you look at the technological dimension, we still don't look at it as engineers, we look at it as a socio-technical system, meaning that the infrastructure has social, political, and economic dimension as well, but these two things should not be mixed up together. The city as a whole is a big socio-technical system. The infrastructures are socio-technical system in themselves, but here we really focus on infrastructures, not the city as everything mixed up together. So that's the clarification of what we look at. And it's fine, everyone can talk a smart city and everything, but we just focus on that dimension.
I mean, we wanted, maybe we're also a little bit, under the impression now of this engineering environment we are in. I mean, we want...
You have two engineers as your team. That's
no, but I mean, we want to look at concrete things, things that are... I mean, it's nice to discuss concepts. It's nice to discuss online communities. I mean, you can have big conferences about, the new identity in the globalized, localized world with the internet and things like that. But I don't know. I mean, we're a little bit more hands-on, now. So going from here, so this is actually copied from, you remember from where? From Schneider. I mean, so all the vendors, they have their own slides on smart cities. I think we have seen everything. Okay, but this is not stupid. I mean, this is Schneider Electric. Okay, and they basically that's their conceptualization, because they said this is we can offer. We can sell you smart heating and cooling. We can sell you smart appliances or things like that. And that's how they categorize that. So there is transport, energy, water, housing. I put here other government services. You could put other things, but they didn't put because they probably have nothing to sell in the other dimension. Okay, but I'm not criticizing. I mean, this is not all these people. I mean, we find actually interesting people there. There's people who think, what are we doing? What is happening? Things like that. But so you have a list of things. And probably in 10 years, this list will look very, very differently, because you have other, especially the critique here still is that there is no link between the different things, because you could make a link between energy and transport. You can make a link between energy and water, and it's still very, very sectoral. But basically, those are showcases. And they show you this and then say, okay, we have digital water metering, and that's the smart city. Or, and yes, it is an element of what we say where digitalization affects the infrastructures. Okay. So let's now look at what that means for the management of the city. So I have still 10 minutes or not?
Cool.
Okay. So we have the infrastructure layer. And we have the different infrastructures, let's say water, waste, energy, transport, or even trains, buses, things like that. Traditionally, it's all separated, okay? Different organizations, different things. On top of that, we have the different jurisdictions. I mean, we already know, in a metropolitan area, if this is the metropolitan area, we have, I don't know, how many did you say in Athens? 34 municipalities or, jurisdictions or something like that. So everything, infrastructure's fragmented, okay? Then we have services, okay? The customer, citizens somewhere here, and we have services that are offered by government agencies, if you want, services by NGO, services by companies, whatever, okay? They don't necessarily talk to each other, all that. And now, thanks to digitalization, I think we can do something on the management of the infrastructure layer. This should come before. I mean, the digital layer can help you to manage the infrastructure layer better because, I mean, in a very simplistic way, on this data layer, all the data are confused. So you have their data from the bus, data from the train, data from the water, data from the users, data from everything is there, okay? I mean, they are not necessarily shared or accessible, but potentially everything is confused. And if you can analyze these, there is not even an order that this comes before the other, it's just a bunch of data. If you have a good algorithm, you come up with some intelligent, analytical tool, maybe you can see links, you can make links that you could not make on the physical layer. You can start to compare municipality 34 with municipality 33 with the transport here, make a link if this one is late. I mean, you can make connections that you could never make before, okay? So you have that, and that could help you to manage, to govern the infrastructure layer, as I said before, more efficiently, better, okay? But it's still the same infrastructure layer. It's not another. Okay? You can detect potholes. I mean, you have this app in New York City which tells you where the potholes are, or the parking spaces, or and that doesn't discriminate to municipalities. Whether you're in the Bronx or in Manhattan, it's the same app. Okay. So that's one managed. The other one is the managing of the data layer. Okay. And I think that's one of the big issues we have to discuss. Who owns these data? Where are these data? Who has access to these data? Data are not free. I mean, they don't have much cost, but they are not free. And not all the actors are willing to give the data for free. I mean, I have this fantastic debate in Switzerland, where basically we have two operators. We have the train company that has fantastic data on everybody traveling everywhere, okay? And we have the bus company that has fantastic data because they give free Wi-Fi in the bus. So they capture all the data from everybody, okay? They don't exchange the data, okay? So the bus does not know when the train is late, okay? So it leaves, but the people miss the connection, okay? Technically, it's not an issue. It could be easy, but the two companies, both owned by the government, by the way, same government, they don't want to exchange the data, okay? Because for strategic purposes, okay? So I mean, just to illustrate, so you have huge, and the government, I talked to the minister, she said, now you sit together, you share these data, it's post-public companies, and they say, yes, minister, and they go behind and they laugh and they don't, okay? So it's really, I mean, so I think this is something that we haven't really addressed at all, and then there is also the question, at which level should these data be managed? Is that the urban level? Is it the national level? Is it Europe? If I talk to the Commission, I mean, I work a lot with the European Commission. For them, it's clear. This is a European data layer. This is not national, not, but they dream, okay? And for Google, it's of course a global data layer, not at all a local data layer. So that's another kind of, but I think this is a big challenge here. And who? Is it private? Is it public? Is it PPP? Is it who? You know, I think that but if you agree with me that this data layer is the crux of the matter, is the new thing, I mean, then there is an issue of governing, managing the data layer. And now we don't have much time, but I mean, I'm writing a lot on these things. We're writing a report for the European Parliament. I think the fundamental question here is, what is this data layer? And I think you have two options. Is it a good? Is data a good? A physical good? You know, something that you produce, you have paid for producing, or somebody has paid for producing, you exchange, I give you my data, you give you yours, you pay me, you don't pay me, we exchange and things. Is it something, is it a commercial kind of thing? Or is the data layer another infrastructure, which you need to have, on the basis of which you have you can have services? We need the data on transport in Helsinki, that's what they say, and then we have mobility services providers which, thanks to the access to these data, can provide good services, okay? I mean, philosophically, I think that's the fundamental question. Is it a tradable good, a purely commercial thing, belongs to the ones who have produced it, and then they can exchange it or sell it or not sell it? Or is it a public infrastructure that becomes necessary for, I don't know, the services in general, for the city to function, for the people to be happy, for the economy to thrive, for things like that? I think that's the fundamental. Now, this is a purely theoretical question, because in practice it will be a good, in reality. But philosophically, I think there is a point to be made that it could be, some of these data could be part of an infrastructure. Okay, you and now Lenio first, and then you.
I work with geographical information, geographical information systems, and it's really tough to exchange.
Yeah.
I don't know, I think that the discussion is not going to end here, but definitely I think that when you see that this problem happens, not just in a developing country, but also on the core of the world, like in Switzerland,
absolutely.
like a
I
public
mean, it has nothing, it's the same data
company
everywhere.
doesn't exchange, I think that probably if you provide that as a good, it will be classified, it will have a value, and I think it will exchangeable. Because as you told, in the end they are going to laugh and they are not going to exchange. And look, I'm not for privatization. I believe that the state has to provide some strategic things, because if it's not profitable, it's not going to be well delivered. But I don't know, as you show it, or as a physical good, or as an infrastructure, a public one, I don't know, I think that if everywhere it's not exchangeable in as a public service, I think as a good it would work better.
I think in reality it will be exchanged like a good, because the interests of the actors are such that I mean, we know that Uber doesn't want to share their data.
They are now, since a month.
Where?
On the internet, you can sign up and you
But
can get
just
rid of it.
limited. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure
limited.
it's just
Limited.
limited. data.
Limited for 5 American cities.
Yeah. Yes,
They're
it's
going
not.
to share it for Kampala with you.
Okay. no, I mean that
Yeah.
But it's not the whole
That
There's
is-
data.
time.
Okay, it's not the whole
It's not the
data,
whole
but it's
data,
taken
but
along.
okay.
Yeah, but the other part of the data they can sell,
Right.
yeah.
so it's a
And
good.
they share some data, and they do it. I mean, the reason why they also, I mean, this is, I know from the European Commission, they are now sharing some data because they are afraid that the Commission will regulate, which will be much worse for them than saying, okay, you can have the data, and you know, this is the one that screams most, so let's give them something, so we are not threatened
Yeah,
by,
I know.
you know, some general. So,
That's the reason.
but I'm not criticizing. I think this is.
In strategy.
This is you have all these actors, each of the actors has their own strategy, but the strategy of each of these actors, including the public train company, is not necessarily identical to the strategy of the urban metropolitan area. You know, so each actor will have their own strategy. I mean, sociology still applies. Despite digitalization, sociology has not been invalidated. So okay, you had a remark?
Yeah, so I would also argue that the good, so you said like good or infrastructure, and I would say the good could potentially be split further into the individual and the aggregator, because right now the aggregator is the one who's deriving the benefit from the individual. But I know, for example, like part of the debate on releasing the data or whether it's a public or a private good is like, should the aggregator even have the authority? And if the aggregator is getting the money, should part of that money go back to the person who produced the data, right? So
Exactly.
I think the
Who
good
pays
is
for the data
exactly.
to begin with?
Who generates it even, right?
Yeah. And if it's user generated, you know, I mean, should the individual should I get some money for the data that
Exactly.
Google siphons off from my
From your usage.
Yeah.
Well,
You know, I mean,
they're covered because you give your consent.
yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not, you know.
Yeah, you sign for that.
Yeah, we're talking about theoretical kind of things, but I think Brenda first, and then you know.
Actually, I'm surprised or I'm worried about the regulatory and competition policy part, because if it is an essential good and this data is an essential good for something else, then the regulatory authority then should come in and take a look at in all these topics. However, where is the data? Where is the firm that owns this data? It's over the world, so you cannot.
Exactly.
You cannot get for this firm in Mexico when this firm is in California. So our jurisdictional power doesn't go into the states. I think it's a global thing.
Absolutely. I think there are two issues here. I mean, we have been thinking a lot about regulation. I think there are two issues. One is the jurisdictional issue. I mean, the regulation is a national regulation and all that. Is not sure whether the national level is really the most relevant level. I mean, some of it is really global, and we know we don't have global regulation. Some of it is just subnational, you know, I mean, some urban kind of things may be more relevant. We don't need to have the whole country covered. We need, you know, certain areas. So there's a jurisdictional issue with regulation.
Yes.
The other issue which we really have now is that all the regulation is sector specific. So we have an energy regulator, we have a transport, I mean, we don't even have a transporter. We have a train regulator, we have a bus regulator, we have a taxi regulator, we have an air regulator, we have a telecom regulator, and actually all this is so each of them is now trying to figure out what they do with digital as part of their thing, where we should actually think, should we actually, I mean, we think with Europe about this, should we create a new regulatory layer, a digital regulator? What would that be? You know, of course, everybody is afraid to create any sort of new agency. I mean, you could only agree to a new agency if we get rid of the old agency, but since we cannot get rid of the old agency, you know, I mean, these kind of questions, the regulation is now far behind the digitalization of everything. I mean, and it has always been. I mean, but now since the whole thing accelerates further, you know, so anyway, your point, and then we can stop.
I just wanted to say that I think it's very sad that you see public authorities, you know, using public money to collect data and not have them open to the public. I think that this is the biggest problem by far. I think that all public authorities think that data is under their own ownership, which is I think a very you know, wrong point of view. And at some point, you know, this data eventually will be open, you know, apart from the private data, and then, you know, everything else will become a transferable good, you know, exchangeable good. Because you see now that private IT companies, they buy, you know, they buy other companies either because of their technology or because of their data.
Yeah.
This is the two reasons that, you know, companies get acquired. So, but it's really sad to see public companies and cities and stuff not to share all the data because they think it's under their own ownership with everything that they do with public money.
Open data.
Okay.
They don't have to be open, they have to be public, you know?
But let me just conclude here. I mean, maybe if we have 5 more minutes, you know, just to sort of, I mean, we said, if we look at smart cities, I mean, what struck us first was that we had, that smart city is the vendor's perspective, you know. So you have the hardware vendors that talk to you about smart city, okay? And of course they, I mean, those are the Schneider Electrics or even Malaysia Telecom when they, you know, they're a big smart city, or they will tell you about smart city. They say we own the infrastructure and so we generate the data and we can do smart city, okay? Then we have the infrastructure company's perspective, okay? So I talked to you about Smart Regio Basel, you know, this is driven by the local utility. I mean, they provide the water and the electricity and things, and they say we are the smart, you know, this is their perspective. Since we are sitting on all this, we are the smart city because we can generate the data, okay? Then you have the data management, the IBMs and the Ciscos and the things like that, you know, that we can analyze these data and we are smart city because we are able to, I mean, I'm not criticizing, I think everybody has a valid point of view, but it's always a partial point of view, okay? And so that's what, each of them calls it smart city, but it's from a different perspective in the whole thing. In my view, the city is something different. You know, it's not just one of these. The city's perspective, it's sort of, or ideally the metropolitan area's perspective on the smart city probably still needs to be invented, but it's a different perspective than any of these layers or vendors or things like that. So I think this is the, you know, ultimately, I think we should define somehow what that perspective on the smart city is. And then we can come back to this thing that we a little bit criticized in the beginning. So, you know, maybe it's also about participation and communities and innovation, and, you know, it's not just about making this and that more efficient. But we have found I mean, even the places where we have found cities that say we are a smart city, I won't say names now, but you know, where people say we are a smart city, and then you look and it's the same slide as one of these vendors, okay? Because the vendors managed to sell them the concept of the smart city, their concept of the smart city as being the city's perspective. I mean, only in Seoul we really found that the city had their own thought about what a smart city could be. And even there, you know. So let me just conclude. What is at stake? So we have these perspectives, okay? We have the hardware perspective, the operator, infrastructure, data management vendor, the data perspective, and then ideally we have the city's perspective that should cover everything. And I think there's sort of 3 stakes, 3 things that, or more questions that we should ask. Citizens or consumers? I mean, it also has to do about data as goods or data as, you know, ultimately is data just a new economy where, you know, everybody tries to make money and then there are consumers, or even if you don't pay the app, you still pay with your privacy or with something, you know. It's a consumer perspective. I think that's one of the big questions we have to ask, okay? And it's probably the city's perspective should be more citizens, and the others, they ultimately want to sell something, okay? Demand, the second big question, demand pull versus technology push. I mean, are we pushing technology? And a lot of these vendors here, they're pushing something. They have something, and then they're pushing it and using the city to push it, okay? And I'm not saying it's all bad. I mean, some of these are really good things, okay? Smart meters are good things. I'm just not sure, you know, then they come to me as a regulator and they say, we should socialize the costs, okay? We want everybody to have a smart meter, and then we calculate, and the cost of a smart meter is far too high. I mean, you cannot sell, you could sell to 10% of the citizens, you could sell a smart meter and it makes economic sense. To 90% it doesn't make sense. But if they can convince the city that everybody has to have it, and you can socialize the cost, then, you know, that's what I call technology push, okay? Mitsubishi. Okay.
I think that will happen with electric cars in cities.
It happens with tons of things. I mean, this is a fundamental question. You know, are we pushing some technologies, or is there really a demand that solves a problem? Okay, and then you can combine it with citizens or something like that. And the third one, I think that's the fundamental question. And in our MOOC, then from here we get to the transformation. Who leads the transformation? Who is the driver of this? Is this just happening naturally? But we know that's not the reality. I mean, there are always interests somewhere. Nothing unfolds, you know, there's always some actors more interested. But who leads the transformation? Is it the technology companies? Is it the national government? Is it the state government? Is it the local government? Is it a political party? That's also very interesting to see which parties are driving and which parties are not driving, you know, or I don't know, where is the leadership in this? And we have a hard time finding really, you know, smart leaders for this. I mean, and frankly, in academia, there is not much. You know, there is not much intelligence on these things. I mean, so I will stop here, but I think those are sort of the questions. I mean, at least that's the state of our thinking about smart cities. So I'm not saying, you know, in 2 years I will tell you exactly the same thing, but that's where we have come to at this point. The rest of the MOOC is just more details on this and that, you know, regulatory issues and, you know, privacy issues and all these kind of things. But that's sort of the conceptual framework. So I hope it. I mean, our role here is to help you think this somehow, not tell you how to think, but what to think about. I don't know. Conclusion, remarks. It's an interesting topic. I mean, it's new. It's.
I'm glad some thinking is being put into this, because like I've heard this term thrown around so much and inserted everywhere, but I've never really understood what it means, smart city. Like it's used everywhere.
Do you understand it better?
No, but I understand the complexity behind it a little bit more, because I think it's used a lot now as a sort of trend term.
Yeah, it's
but it's just, I wasn't really sure what it meant.
Yeah.
And I don't, like, I think what this has shown me is that it's not entirely clear what it means either.
No, if people ask me what, I mean, I have no, you know, I cannot have 2 hours on to elaborate, you know, say, what is smart city about? You know, basically I would say it's about efficiency. You have technologies that can help you make things a little bit more efficient. But that doesn't make cities greener. It does not necessarily make them more resilient, more sustainable. But you know, to the positive side, there is some efficiency gains that can be made in this. I think that I'm pretty sure today.
And I think Europe has adopted the definition that came out from program for funding and like qualifying as smart. There is a definition with 8 areas of implementation. What?
Which, if I remember correctly, they included everything as well.
Yes, everything.
That's what I was saying, you know, the smart economy and
It's
smart governance.
Yes,
smart
yes.
This is Europe's definition. It's everything.
Yeah.
It's not very helpful.
I mean, that's why it's branding more than.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
But you get money for.
Oh,
doing things
absolutely.
like that,
I
so,
mean,
you know.
No, this is very useful for us because if we go and want to get research money, we know exactly which jargon to use.
Exactly.
You know, I mean that. But okay, Brendan, then we have lunch.
I'm worried about market concentrations, but not exactly in
Yeah. Yeah.
in this the further markets, because I
Yeah.
mean not exactly in this market, in infrastructure markets, but further, because if you have data, you can
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
an agent be out of the market.
Yeah, I don't have this
So-
here.
That's what I will be worried about, market concentrations, because you can entrance, unless they are disruptive, they cannot compete in the market.
Exactly. I mean, there is. I don't have it on this slide, but I have another slide where I have another box here, and another blue box, which basically says winner takes all. That you know, first mover, you know, sort of
Advantage.
I mean,
First
you
mover
may not know,
advantage.
but Uber is still losing millions a day. Yeah?
I know.
You know, so you know, just to occupy the market, and I think that raises all kind of question of concentration, regulation, but it's global, and it's a few. I mean, we have this thinking also in academia. You know, I mean, the first MOOC people. I mean, how many MOOCs can you make on introduction to physics? You know. I mean, it's the first ones, the one. So I think that is a big issue here, and it's in the literature. I mean, this, you know, it's disruption, and then winner. They call it winner takes all. Good. Okay. Thank you.